Kind of wired. That's what I said. It's kind of random. Kind of random. It's going on and off, that's for sure. It hasn't flickered. It flickered on Sunday. I didn't see it. Adam was the one who noticed it when he was preaching. So I think it was 11, though, that it flickered. There's a sheet up here if you want one. Yeah, in fact, do me a favor, Derek. Just pull it out in the middle of the aisle so people notice it. There's a sheet up here, Mickey. We're gonna start here right now. Everything ready, Adam? Starting to add some miles, Mickey. Starting to add some miles. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe I would do another half in the fall. So I don't run much more than 5. So I did 6 and 7 last week, and so I figure I'm going to work up. Yeah, as long as I don't injure myself, and and the 6 felt really good actually. This muscle right here did not hurt, but it felt like I'd used it. No, I do a lot of hip. I do a lot of hip exercises because I've had pain here and I've had pain in the ankles, and so. Wow. No. Yeah. I'll tell you what, those really thick ones they got now that cost me $160, they are nice to run on. I wear Sauconys. I wear Sauconys, and yeah, they are. But they are nicer than anything. Even though they look huge, but they are good. Hey, I'm going to start now. Adam's got us turned on. Thank you, Adam. Everyone say thanks to Adam. Yeah. So we'll. Oh, we got a few more coming in. Welcome back. We got some papers, assuming we got some left. I think so. Up in the top, up in the front. Hey, Aaron. We'll start with the prayer here. Lord, bless this time together. May your spirit be made known by the gathering of these people filled with that spirit. And may that spirit join together to be your body in this part of the world. Amen. So last week we talked about kind of the headwinds that the church is under right now. Come on in. You're not bothering anything. There's some papers up here. We talked about the headwinds that the church is under right now. The church has experienced since 1990 steady declines in attendance that have just stabilized the last few years. And in those steady declines, the mainline denominations, of which Messiah is a proud member of, have had even steeper declines than all of our other expressions of Christ. And so we talked about some of the reasons that might be. Some of them are unique to our quick growth in the 50s, where we built a lot of small churches in a lot of neighborhoods that then we couldn't support, and we've done a poor job demographically letting our churches continue to look like our neighbors. We tend to look like who we built the church for, and when the neighborhood changes, we no longer speak to that new neighborhood. Another problem is that we've got mainline churches have all churches actually, but mainlines especially because they have all these buildings, tend to put more money into buildings than they do ministry when you look at their budgets, and so that fails us too, and other reasons. One thing, we looked at how Messiah was doing in the midst of that. So the last 20 years have seen the steepest decline until the stabilization. And we figured that we didn't have any decline in the last 20 years, a slight growth, which isn't like anything, they're going to write a book about, but it does beat the odds of some of our neighbors, and so maybe there's something positive there. What I wanted to start here today with is, what do you guys think the strengths of this church are right now? Because I do feel strongly that our congregation is well prepared for the future. It's just figuring out how to address that future is the harder piece. Carol?
I think we're very welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
When I came in the 90s, no one spoke to me. And if I hadn't been specifically looking for a local Lutheran church, I would have left.
Oh.
Because
the 90s were rough around here. There was a big transition, and the 90s were tough. We visited Messiah in the 90s and didn't stay. Went to another Lutheran church.
very cold.
Oh.
We are not that way, I don't think.
No. I think we hear from people that we are welcoming. Some worship services more welcoming than the others. Yeah, one of the gifts I always say, and I think I said last week, I think we have a strong sense of community in the congregation that we are intentional about, and that people see, and they might want to be part of that. What other strengths do we have?
We have a good preacher.
Yeah, there you go. Virginia? Mhm. Yeah, we have a nice small core of some really strong leaders. Virginia, I'd put you in one of those, in that pocket too, that's for sure. A lot of those, and so the real strengths is those leaders are really self-motivated, and the church, the leadership has done well, I think, to enable leaders to do their work without much fuss from council or anybody else. I think that's a positive. And one of the problems, of course, is that a lot of those leaders are getting older, and there's going to have to be a turnover of leaders, and that makes us anxious, like who's going to replace, this leader or that leader. But yeah, but I think the strong leaders we've had, they've led us into some really good ministries that we only have because of them. And we can name some of those ministries, right? So we wouldn't have a strong sewing group, like I said last week, where, I don't know how many were there today, 20 probably? Huh? About. Yeah, without Bessie, and now April's taken over that. And we can go down that list. One of our strengths is that we have a good servant's heart, that we've worked hard at, and we are excited about. People within the congregation are excited about all the serving we do to our neighbors in need, and people in the community know that's who we are. And one of our leaders, our main leader there, is Suzanne. We wouldn't serve so many places without Suzanne moving us to do that, and her motivation to do that. And so that's not only an accolade to Suzanne, which is greatly deserving, but you also want a structure that lets Suzanne just be Suzanne, and we support her as she's doing the hard work of ministry. And so I would think that's a good thing. More? We talked about our choir last week, our choir being a good gift. For choirs are getting harder to grow in mainline churches. I've said to Tyler and Carol's our worship chair right here in front of me, that I fear that choirs are going to be a dinosaur someday that we can no longer support, and Tyler has done a wonderful job with Carol's leadership, doing some innovative things to bring in some Capital kids that have then attracted other people to be part of the choir, that worked on both ends and made our choir sound wonderful. So I would lift that up. I think that's good innovation, especially on something that's getting harder in our world to convince people is worthwhile, and our choir is worthwhile. More? Barb? Linda? I was looking, huh? Yeah, good job. Yeah, Linda was part of that preschool for years. Yeah, we started that preschool in the 70s, and it's as strong as it was in all these years. And it went through a real tough transition because it was a stay-at-home mom preschool for years, and it had to kind of change their market. Jim Keeney was a leader when we were making those changes. It had to change their market to be more of more for working parents and have aftercare and daycare and all-day preschools rather than half days. And we did that well. We did that well. It was hard though. We lost teachers as we changed and lost directors, but we got on the other side of it. So maybe that's another strength, is that Messiah's been willing to change some things, and that's and those changes have kept us relevant in our neighborhood. Yeah, Tim. Wow, that's just because you're a Toledoan, Tim. That's why. We pay these Toledo guys to say nice things. That's right. Rocket fan. So I think those are good. Anything else? I think our building is a real strength. It's also a great expense, and it's going to continue to be a great expense. So it's a double-edged sword. But what I love about what you guys have allowed is the leaders of this congregation have been passionate about sharing this building with our neighbors and with our congregation, and you people have allowed that and encouraged that, and that costs us money, for lights and gas and custodial work and breaking things and repairing things and moving things, and it also means that you sometimes can't do the things like have your baby shower because we got a Girl Scout jamboree on one of the days, and so you guys have done that wonderfully. I've been at other churches lately, and I haven't found one that I've been at. That doesn't mean they don't exist. That's willing to share their space with the outside world, and the way that you guys share your space with the outside world, and so generously inside too. You could see our calendar. We use the heck out of this building. So even though it costs us a lot of money every year to run this big building and to replace everything that breaks on it, it is a real good gift. We're using it well for the gift we have, I think. Bob? Mm-hmm. It just feels like you're hiding your treasure under a stone, and so. Mm-hmm. One of them just broke their arm out there just this week. He was in here getting Messiah night meal, and he just broke his arm out in our. Yeah, and and even doing things like building that playground, which we didn't get any fuss over, even though we didn't really build that playground for us. We built that playground for our neighbors, and that just made sense to people. Oh yeah, I get that, and I think that says something. Alex? Huh? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, and actually all the international connections we've had, and the way that's helped us connect to our immigrant community, and then even to understand the larger debate in our society about immigrants, because we have brothers and sisters that are immigrants here in the church, and so we could speak to our neighbors about that in a way that's positive. You know, the Yela, which is a village in Liberia that Yogi's from, and that we have helped, and hopefully next year, Yogi will help them more with their school church building that they got, and how they need Messiah's help to fill that, and ways we can do that. Again, that comes because people have a passion, and there's an easy path to kind of share that with the world. Anybody else before I move on? I think being an affirming church is a strength. I said that last week. I think that's something that speaks to our neighbors. It definitely speaks a word to people that have found us, because they're searching for a place that is welcoming in a way that they long to be welcomed, or that they long for their children to be welcomed. And we do that even though we don't all agree whether about the LGBTQ issue. We stay together, trusting God's mercy, even if we don't agree with that decision. And I think that's a nice sign of people moving together in faith too. Another one? Did I interrupt somebody? Carol, was that you? Harold? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we had the new member class, and we looked at the what's it called? What's the first line that you have your not your motto, but anyways, it was well, yeah, our mission statement. Thank you. Sorry. Hello, 62, coming. Yeah, your mission statement. Yeah, and Harold, what it lifted up, right, is that we're to be people that are that are loving God and worship, and then serving our neighbors with the heart of Christ, or however it read in there. And those were the two things in there we talked about, that worship should be the center of our faith life. That's always the first thing. And if you're part of the worship staff around here, you know, my motto the whole time is, you know, let's not let this suck today. You know, that's you know, that we should hold ourselves to a standard where we expect where us, you know, those that are leading worship, you know, should be putting in hard work and time into it. And yeah, and I think we have real good gifts in Tyler that does that, and Ernie, and then our band that plays every week at our 9:30 service. Good. I'm going to go on from there, and I'm going to move here. So this next part is just about me. This next little section. I wanted to have. I'm guessing that sometime, I don't really know what's going on the 21st. I've been kept out of that loop on purpose. But I'm hoping I'll have like a moment to have like 3 paragraphs where I can say that day. And some of the things that I'd want to say that day are just the things that I've appreciated about the 23 years I've been here. And so you don't have my list, but I'm... Yeah, well, that's it. I know. It won't be longer than that. But but here are the things, if you ever wondered what I like to do the most, you know, because I do a lot of things, different things. But what I like to do the most, I made a list of them. I like to preside and lead worship. You know, newsflash, I like to be the center of attention, and so that's the darkness, the dark edge of that. But I also like to be part of creating rituals and trying to make those rituals meaningful for people, and then fussing with them the next year. If your Carol writes a list after Easter of all the things that she liked about Easter this year and all the things we didn't, and I do the same, and Tyler does the same, so we could just fuss with it every year and try to make it a little better. And that's I really appreciate that. And I like the presiding part. I like being at the table and having all my friends around that table and serving this meal that Christ promises to be part of. That's probably my favorite part of the whole worship service every week. And so that made my list. I like to teach in small groups and discussions, especially if I can engender discussions. Sometimes discussions are hard to engender. You know, Jim Keeney, who's gone to a lot of my education classes, would say, you know, Carl, you got way too much here on this list that you're going to be able to get through. And so, you know, the more ambitious I get of what we're going to get through, the less than discussion. So, but I really do like when I hear people's ideas and I grow from them. And I hear something new that I hadn't heard before. I like visioning, you know, starting with the problem, visioning what's wrong, consensus and planning and implementation that happens as you're trying to solve that problem, and then celebrating at the end of how we can do this and that we've done this. That's just a really neat part of being a leader of a church. And so hopefully every one of our leaders has had that same sort of sense of, you know, we got this thing wrong, and what are we going to do to fix it, and who do we have to get involved, and what steps do we have to have. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with our leaders as we put our heads together to brainstorm on how we're going to do something, and I think that's just really fun. That's a thing I enjoy. I like funerals. I like every part of a funeral. I like being with families on their last days and trying to be a quiet, helpful presence in the midst of that. I like planning and hearing people's ideas of how they can honor this loved one that they lost. I like seeing family and then the luncheon afterwards, and all of our wonderful volunteers at the church that don't know this family, but yet they're given an entire day to pass out bulletins and serve communion and cook and serve and clean up. It's just a real good moment. Funerals are one of the things that get hard for me after I've been here 23 years, and I'm emotionally invested in a lot of the people that we have funerals for. So in the midst of doing that, I'm starting for the last number of years grieving myself. You know, these people that we're burying, and that gets harder. That's for sure. But funerals are one of the best parts of my job, that's for sure. I like making, I got it in quotes, small talk. You know, and I got it in quotes because it's never small. You know, I genuinely enjoy asking questions and hearing about things and encouraging a conversation. You know, especially at a quiet table, and having people an opportunity to share. A lot of our people live alone, and it's just wonderful for them to have an opportunity to be in the midst of a conversation, and I like being part of that. So when I move up and down at 8 o'clock, you know, and in the Welcome Center and that's not work for me. That's just a lot of fun because I like to catch up with people and know how your lives are going. I like seeing our leaders grown passionate and being part of a system that allows them to do exactly what they want to do with the ministry that they've been given power over. I just think that's the best way to do things. You know, the worst way to do things is for top-down, is for council to decide that we're going to do this and then find a leader that has to do that, and then that leader has to, and that's a lot of councils. You know, if you get elected to council, then you become the worship chair. You know, the first one where they're all going, who wants to be this chair and that chair, No, you don't need leaders that aren't passionate about what they're called to lead. You need leaders that want to do this ministry, and I like letting that happen. I like when you guys love on each other. I come home and tell Paige, the really nice thing that that Stanley did for Susan, and and how cool that was, and it just really warmed my heart. Or this person's sick, and the way people are taking the wife to and from the hospital because it's across town, and I think that's who we're called to be, a family. That's what family would do for one another, and I love it when you guys act like family. That warms me. I like seeing church kids grow up. That's one of the best gifts of being around here for 23 years is confirming kids that I baptized and marrying kids that I've confirmed and being part of their lives. I do so few weddings anymore. Pastors aren't, and weddings would not make the list of things I like the most. So I'm not crying about not doing weddings. Weddings are a pain in the butt, but I do so few of them anymore that when I get to do a church kid wedding, like we had Liz Wallace last year and Allison Shaw, and those are like just crazy fun when I've known these kids since they were really tiny. And when people get married a second time, so they're adults that are in the midst of being married, and I know and I know this person. Those are fun. I like special music, and I got that in quotes because I don't mean necessarily the choirs and Tyler on the piano or Ernie on the organ. I just really mean when you're what Harold said. When you're in the midst of worship and a song just hits you exactly right, or a hymn just brings you to that right spot, or the way it's being presented, or the choir's added a descant that just really sends it to a new place, or those are the moments I'm talking about. And the other special music I love is I love when someone just steps out of their comfort zone and decides they're going to sing Amazing Grace as a solo in the middle of the summer, and that always warms my heart. It might not sound the best, but God loved them for wanting to give this gift. So that always makes me smile. And the last one I put on here was I really loved Thad and Liz. I really, the two associates we had, the two colleagues, very different people, and both wonderful gifts for me. I was when Liz left, it's going to sound bad but it was like when your puppy dies, right? When you're it's not going to you're not going to outlive that puppy, that it's going to die on you and it's going to leave you, and that's how I was always with my colleagues. When they left, I knew Thad wasn't going to stay forever, but it's hard when he left, and I knew Liz wasn't going to stay forever, but it's hard when they leave, and they were just really good gifts for me, and they helped me grow. So that's the list I made. That you might hear some parts of that later on. The thing I wanted to is to talk about me leaving. And I wrote that letter, and that letter really, I worked hard on that letter, and it really said the reasons I'm leaving. It's pretty bare on that letter, I think. I think there's real strong headwinds, like where we started last week. But I think we're prepared to meet them. But I really think you need someone with a 5-year vision of how to meet them and new ideas on what the church might need to look like in the next 20 years. Ideas that I haven't read the books on and I haven't gone to the conferences for as I become more and more of a dinosaur. So I do think you need someone with some vision for the future that I don't have the knowledge of, and because I'm not going to be here, I don't necessarily have the motivation to do like I should, and that's not fair to you. And I feel like I'm leaving you as strong as I found you. I wouldn't want to leave you worse than I found you, and so that's probably the biggest one. And then and then I am just physically and emotionally tired. I saw a therapist last year because I was kind of exhausted after Easter, and I thought maybe I was burned out, and I went through, how if you've had a therapy session, I kind of went through the things that were going on, and at the end he said, and a lot of it was like I listed like 5 deaths in the church that were all leaders and people that I'd been close with in the church, and then deaths in my own life. And he said, boy, you just have a lot of deaths surrounding you, Carl, because I spent like that hour that I was paying him for going through a list of all these people that I was close to that I've lost, and that wears you out. I'm not tired of working too much. I always tell people I really don't think I work. I don't work any more than I did at Roadway Express. The work schedule for a pastor is weird because you just never have days off. But it's not like I'm working 12-hour days on a Friday, my day off. I'm working 3 or 4 hours on a Friday and 2 hours on a Saturday, sort of thing. And yes, but the harder piece, it's like when I was a salesman. You've never done enough if you're a salesman, right? There's always one more call you could be making and one more thing you could be reaching out to. And as a pastor, that's true too. I mean, it's really hard to justify why I didn't call so-and-so, other than I was just tired after a couple hours on a Friday, and I just didn't want to. But yet it would have taken all of 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So you're always kind of, you're always kind of feeling like you're just not quite doing enough. And I lived with that for a while, healthy. That's called boundaries. You need to set boundaries and respect your boundaries. But I got sloppy in these last 5 years, and I didn't respect my boundaries as well as I should have, and that was a piece of it too. And then the other one is one that all of you guessed. Paige retires. Feels like a good moment of renewal in our household after 40 years of marriage, and a good time to think of doing something new and something different. And so Paige's retirement definitely played a big part into what we were going to do different. And so those are the reasons. None of those reasons are because you guys have, pissed me off or angered me or anything like that, or all of that is kind of just me stuff. And I just want to be as transparent about that as possible. And I'm 62, and I'm 62, and we've been really fortunate. I could tell you, I work with a lot of people that are just in some financial difficulties, and Paige and I haven't been, but the reason we haven't been is because the cards have just rolled really well for us, and please don't judge other people that are in financial difficulties, because I'll tell you what, one divorce, one job loss that you can't fill right away, one gamble on a new business that didn't pan out, one illness that keeps you from it. It's just, and if you don't have any kind of safety net. Paige and I both had wealthy parents that are good safety nets when we made mistakes in our 20s and 30s, like 20s and 30-year-olds make. And so I do have a plea for people that, just because you were able to win the financial lottery doesn't mean that other people aren't trying just as hard as you are and don't have those same gifts. But Paige and I have had good financial gifts, and so I can afford to work less at the same time that she's making less at 62. My financial guy says I can't afford to retire though. So there were limits on what I could do, and so that's why I'm moving on to 3/4 time. So I've been in a call process, and I would have preferred to stay in Southern Ohio. My home is always going to be in Pickerington until Paige dies, and then I might move somewhere. But that's where all my grandkids are, and that's where we're going to live. So Yeah, so I would have preferred to do three-quarter time in the area, out in the country, Newark, Lancaster, half hour, those sort of areas, and London. And there was just nothing available for me in those areas, I was told by our bishop. And so the plan B was that we'd go to Northeast Ohio, and that's around the cottage that you hear me talk about that's in Ashland County. And so in Northeast Ohio, had more choices than I needed, and a big slate of choices, and I could take a look at all of them. The bishop's office was wonderful, working with me, showing me all the choices, and I interviewed at a couple places, and I've chosen one that's really small. And I can tell you this is, for people that know me, I actually chose a different one, and that had full-time ministers, but they thought maybe they needed a part-time one or for this next one because they didn't have enough money, and they had really a lot of problems when you're interviewing with them, and all these red flags are going up, and I really wanted to go to that one because I was thinking, wow, this place is messed up. This could be a lot of fun, to dig into this and to figure out how to fix this and everything else. And all my pastor friends that have been on this journey with me this last year, and my wife said said no, you're going to go to the small one. And so I'm going to a real small place. Probably they're in the midst of the call process. Paige and I go and meet them next. I've met them 3 times in 3 different interviews. But Paige will go for a congregational meeting next week. And then they'll send out a letter, and we'll talk about that process. But that's where they're at. So I'm expecting I'll end up there, and it's outside of Worcester. So they keep correcting me down there, and now they've got me a little paranoid saying it. But so I need a good book on being a pastor for a small church, because I've never been a pastor for a small church, and really never even belonged to a small church. And this place worships probably, not probably, they worship 45 on their worst days and 65, 70 on their best days. And one service, 9:30. I was telling one of the groups that I wish it was 10:30, but it is what it is. So it's going to be a lot different place than here. Right, yeah. So they're going to get the crappy sermon that the 8 o'clock worship gets every week. No dress rehearsal. I can't figure out what jokes land and what jokes to cut out or anything like that. So I won't live up there. So the plan is that I would be up there Sunday, obviously. So maybe in a typical week, I would drive up Saturday night, stay at my cottage, be up there Sunday, and then maybe a Sunday activity in the afternoon some of those days for the youth or the children, and then I would work Monday. I like to work in my office, as you know. I have a wonderful office at home, and it's a lot quieter at home, but I want to be present for people, and so I like to be here so people can stop by and see me. I told them that at this place, and they looked like I was crazy. Like, well, there's no one here. I mean, you're in the middle of a cornfield. I don't know, but I'm going to work in that little office and on that Monday, and then Tuesday work till the normal time, late afternoon, and then drive back home, and whatever else I need to do from home, and so that's probably the rhythm that I imagine. I ran that by them, and I ran that by their interim that they've had, and that seems really reasonable to both the interim, the guy that had been there, and them. So it sounds real doable. So I might have some real days off coming up, and so I'm going to have to find hobbies and things like that. So we'll see. We'll see what that'll look like. I don't know. No. I leave her. Since she's been retired, I've been really helpful. I've been giving her a list of things to do every day before I go. So that's gone over well. It's gone over well. Yeah, and I got real fears about all this, like anybody else, right? Because they are very sweet people. I've met most of them over this time, and so I don't have any fears about the people. And I win anyways. People are broken, and people are saints, and people got rough edges, and people got beautiful, beautiful soft centers. So I mean, I'm okay with people, but it's just really small, and I just keep going back to like, gosh, what are we going to do? It's just really small. So, but I'm trusting the Spirit's going to live there, and live within me, and we'll figure it out. I am not thrilled about commuting 100 miles, to this place. I don't want to live at my cottage. I never will. So I'm always going to be coming back. In the summer, I'll probably spend more time. But then the other thing, as many of you know, is I take care of my, the primary caregiver for my mom in assisted living in Pickerington at 92, and I like to see her often because she deserves that, because she's very beautiful and special to me. So even if I wanted to live up there, I'd still have to come back, every other day just to see mom. So I'm not thrilled about that piece either. And then the last thing I have on my list here is after June 21st, the custom is that I'm to have virtually no contact with any of you. And the reason for that custom is because pastors just really have bad boundaries with their old congregations. And even if they try, it's hard not to comment when you come to your retired pastor and say, "Can you believe this new guy has changed that?" And and it's, "Why would he change that? I started that 20 years ago. It's like the best thing we've ever done." I can't, and then that gets back there. "Oh, Pastor Carl doesn't like that change either," and it really undermines that person. And to be part of your funerals, I'm not giving that pastor. Remember, I put that in the list of things I enjoy the most. I'm like robbing that new pastor of this opportunity to be intimate with your families in that toughest moment. It's just not fair to the pastor. It's not fair to the church. And this church, especially Messiah, if you're older, meaning not older as like living, but if you were around during the last transition when Pastor Fritz left after 33 years, there were a lot of problems in here, and a lot of those problems were because of just some bad boundaries, and so we'll have to just really watch that. I do hope to be able to come to funerals and things like that. I am allowed to do that, but that'll have to be on, another church has 3/4 of my time, so we'll have to see how that goes. But yeah, so that'll be hard. With that, I'll take some questions before I talk about the call process. Jim? Oh, of course. Yes. I will still be friendly. I'll still be friendly, and I'll still ask about how Sandy's doing if I run it without you, that sort of thing. Yeah. That's fine. A little tougher though if you call, because you've got a personal problem, that of course I wouldn't shut that down because I know about you. Thanks, Derek. But that'll be a little tougher one, a little tougher to maneuver. Because I want to be helpful for you, and I know it's hard for you to call if you call for those reasons, but I also want to steer you to, the pastor of your church now. Any other questions or comments about any of that? Harold?
I don't know what you did last week, but what do you think are some of the biggest challenges facing us right now, from your perspective?
Yeah, we did a lot of that last week. I think the biggest challenges facing us is I think our building is just really costly. And it makes us have to spend a lot of money on building rather than on ministry. Stacy said something wonderful that kind of changed my paradigm a little bit on this from one of the classes she took at Luther. that when they talked about this, she said that ELCA churches, when they get money, the first thing they talk about is what capital improvements can we do, rather than, hey, we could use this $35,000 to start this ministry and to fund this ministry for the next 2 years, or we could bring on this staff person, with this money. And, we got that government money from COVID, and what did we do? Under my leadership, by the way, right? We spent all of that money on capital improvements, and it was like, wow, that feels like that was too close for comfort. Yeah, so I do think that's probably a difficulty for a church this size, that we need to continue to generate enough revenue not only to do ministry, but to keep this building looking beautiful, and those are going to be hard. I think the other thing is that I think our worship has to speak to the neighborhood, and if it stops speaking to the neighborhood, we're just going to stop growing. I think I said in a service once, and I got some pushback, but I said, if our game plan is to chase every last white person in Reynoldsburg and try to beat out Reynoldsburg United Methodist Church at them, that's probably not the best game plan that we have. And I really think that we got to figure out how to speak to our neighbors and continue to find neighbors. And so that might not, and usually that means changing how we do things. And so that's another strong headwind. I think I think we've gone through the partisan problems as good as we could, but the partisanship of this country just worries me. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we're pretty evenly split, 60-40, Republicans, Democrats, and I'm really proud that we're a space where we sit down and we love each other and respect each other. And so I hope that continues, but that's really intentional. And so I worry about that hurting our sense of community. And everyone wants families and children, but in order to get families and children, you really need to have a structure that people sense is loving, and ministry that's focused on family and children, which costs money to do those things. And so, yeah, so those would be it. Linda? Yeah, you might. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's just it. So, and that's something a new pastor can do. Just some hard questions on what are the things that we can't lose, and what are the things that we could change to speak to our neighbors differently, and what that might mean. What that might mean. If our goal, right? I had a pastor, Mark Powell, a professor I love if you do any of my education classes. Mark Allen Powell said that Lutherans are welcoming to everybody as long as they come in and they act like them. and that's the problem, So I don't really have good answers for that. If I had, we'd be doing more things like that. But that's my problem.
I had a friend I wanted to bring to church, and she said, "But you're Lutheran." What's that mean?
Yeah.
And I think to her it means you have to be born Lutheran to be there.
Yeah.
And I think but to outsiders, that's what that means.
And it could, yeah. And Linda, I don't have, again, I don't have problems, but I can tell you, I'm pointing to Jim because, his church is the one, his family's church is the one I point to. Jim grew up at Grace. I don't know if you grew up there. You went there as young adults. But Jim's church that him and Sandy belonged to before they belonged to Messiah was Grace on Refugee. And Grace on Refugee started at Grace on Hopewood or something like that, which is right down there by Brighton and that Old Town East area. And it started there. The neighborhood changed. So they moved to Grace on Refugee in Whitehall, and they were there for years, and then the neighborhood changed, and now they're at Grace in Pickerington. And that's just a really common story. I was talking to Ruth Ann at dinner. We ate together, and Ruth Ann's family church was Resurrection. And Resurrection was a thriving church in Whitehall a little while ago. And now it's barely alive. And yeah, you know, it's not an unusual story for the neighborhood to change in the expression of churches that's in that neighborhood, refusing to change and finding themselves alone. Well, you don't need to get anxious about it now. I think, you know, I don't know what I'm talking about, honestly. I think you need to put people in leadership that have a passion for this, that people in leadership that aren't all white might be helpful. I think you need to identify a ministry that you can speak to our neighbors for, and in that ministry, invite them to worship. We do a really poor job of inviting our neighbors to worship. Like, we have 50 or so neighbors that come every week to Messiah Night, and so this is on me. There's nothing on our table about coming to worship on Sunday morning. I've had people I've eaten with that have said, "Am I invited to worship?" Like I had to give them a password or something like that because they didn't know, so you need leadership that's paying attention to that, and that's on me. Those are things, yeah. So I think so, but I think that's a hard one. Any other comments or questions, Alex? Uh-huh. Oh, what regrets? That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I wish. I don't know. I don't know, Alex. I'd have to really think about that. That's a really good question, but I haven't thought about it. That could be the fourth paragraph. Yeah, I'd have to think about that. I definitely have offended people over the years that I wish I hadn't offended, but yeah. Did you have another one, Alex? Uh-huh. Oh, for the projects that are ongoing. I can't really. I won't be in that position. So it's the new pastor might call me up and say, "What do you want to do about this?" I never called up Landis Kaufman when I got here. And I don't think that's unusual. So I won't be in a position to say, "Hey, what you really need to be doing is working on this." And frankly, that person probably, if you get the right person, doesn't really want to hear from me on that. But but that's a good question, though. But yeah, I don't think I'll be in that position. No, but it'll be possible for you to knock on his door and make yourself heard.
Or her door.
Or her door. Thank you. Or her door. Any other questions, comments, Jim?
For the next guy, yeah.
Or her.
Yesterday, that Baptist church, I believe, right behind CBS on Taylor Road, now have on the bottom of their signage outside the Nepali service Sunday evening.
Yeah.
So they must be allowing their space to be
Yeah.
used.
Yeah, I have real problems with the Nepali services, so I haven't done anything. I get offers. I get opportunities all the time. And the problem I have generally with the Nepali services is if you came to those we had that welcoming our neighbor classes a few years ago, and we had Bhutan. Yeah, is that our council person's name? It's been a long time since I said his name. Yeah. Yeah, he's from Bhutanese. He's Bhutanese. He's from Bhutan. What's his name? His name is similar. It doesn't matter. We know who we're talking about. Our council person here in Reynoldsburg. Anyways, he told me something. He said, our families are so entrenched in Hinduism and the sort of Christianity that people are turning to is a Christianity that causes real disruption in our Hindu families. And he goes, our Hindu families are very open to having all sorts of gods and all sorts of expressions, but a child turns Christian and they sever their relationships with their parents and they tell their parents they're going to burn in hell, and they don't respect any of the traditions anymore because those are Hindu traditions and they're told in their congregations, and so he thought it was a real problem within his community. And that wouldn't be a Lutheran evangelical message, but I don't have Lutherans reaching out to me wanting to start a Nepalese service, which I would be all for. What I have are people that do believe that their parents are going to burn in hell and that they need to. And so I've said no to all those, and I've told them that outright. I said, I just don't believe in your theology or who you think God is, and I think it's harmful for the Nepalese community. So when they've come, they've heard more from me than they want to hear. But that's what I've told them. Yeah, but that's the sort of idea. Is there a Lutheran expression? Do we have some passion for that? And can we do that? We've got a wonderful base of already a lot of wonderful West African immigrants here. Is there a better expression and more? We can not make a separate West African service, but have more work with some of our West African people here and see if we can work more themes into our worship space in the midst of Sunday worship. And so so I think those sort of things are and have speakers. Yeah, I don't know. But I don't think we're having a lot of those conversations. We became an affirming church. We don't do much with that. Is there more we could do with that in the future to speak to our neighbors in ways that we haven't? Does anyone know that we're an affirming church? Would that be helpful for our neighbors to hear? So those are the kind of questions I think we need to ask. The last thing I'm going to do here, Tim? Yeah. Thank you. We do get some complaints, but more often we get people who call because we turn them off and then we forget to turn them back on. So we'll get someone that'll call and say, I haven't heard your church bells in 2 weeks, and we'll do a dope slapping. Oh yeah, just click it back on. Because we'll turn it off for a funeral or something. Okay, here's the end, guys. So this is what next year is going to look like. I'm going to leave on June 21st. We have just heard this last week that the Synod has found an interim for us, and we had conversations with that interim. They're not hired yet, so it's not a done deal, but it looks like we're going to have an interim that's going to start July 1st here at Messiah. So that's just really good news. That's what we wanted. We want some consistent leadership and not a different pastor every week, and consistent leadership internally too. And if we end up with the interim that we're talking to, that interim has all sorts of interim experience too. So they've done this 3 other times, walked a church for a year through this process, which is another wonderful thing. So that really heartens me, that we're going to hopefully find this person will be part of our congregation soon. The interim will only work half-time, meaning that they don't take over my job. They just take over kind of the pastoral things of it. If you close your eyes and imagine what a pastor does, then that's the part that they're going to be doing. And so, they're going to be Sunday morning They're going to work with Tyler and Carol planning worship and Ernie. They're going to probably be here. They're going to probably continue to teach a Bible study in the morning, on the week like I do. Probably not two like I do now. They may or may not be here on Messiah night. Probably not, because we got them just for 20 hours. And just our Sunday morning alone, because we have 3 worship services, is a good, it's a good 6 hours of it, that's for sure. In and out. So,
Will he or she have his writing of his sermon hours as part of
that's all part of it, yeah. Yeah, that's all part of it. So that's all part of it, yeah. Yeah, so if you add in the sermon, it's almost half his time is just for Sunday morning. Between worship planning and sermon writing and then being present, that's half of that 20 hours. So it's not a lot. But considering 70% of our people or so, the 80-20 rules, usually what we say, only see Sunday morning, for most of our people, it'll look normal. And every week will be this new person for that year, and that'll be good stability, if nothing else. We do believe that there's other things that we need done, so we are hoping to work with our staff to add some roles to staff and have some of the other things done that the church expects from a pastor. So all that'll be kind of announced and rolled out to you sometime in June, when it all comes together. But that is the plan, not to just make our volunteer leaders pick up all this slack, but to have some staff get some more compensation and do some of these things too. Yes? Oh yeah, we have the same staff. I don't see any turnover in staff at all. So all of our staff, I assume, are staying and are committed to working here. And the only change possible is Stacy's in a flux right now about exactly what the church wants from her and what she can give in the next year, and so she'll know that probably in the next few weeks too. So by the time I leave on June 21st, council will have a pretty good plan on that next year. I feel confident about that. So that's that piece. But none of it is going to completely replace all the things I do. So it is going to be a year where some things just aren't going to get noticed or picked up on or that too. So I think you got to expect that. Once that interim gets here, he's going to probably, not probably, I've been told that he's just going to live with you for a few months before you do anything. So he's assigned by the bishop's office. And one of his roles is to kind of tell the bishop's office where he thinks you guys are at, and because the bishop's office controls sending us a new pastor. And so hide the crazy whenever you see this interim pastor. So he's going to sit with you for a few months and just kind of evaluate where he thinks you are. Again, if we get this person that's got some experience, he's probably got good wisdom in that area. And then hopefully, this would be my thought, hopefully in the fall, around Thanksgiving, in that time, maybe we'll get a transition team. We'll get permission from the synod to start a transition team. The synod has to give us that permission. No, it's before the call committee. So the transition team will then spend months doing demographic work on the community, surveying the congregation, doing some small groups about the things we've talked about. What do you think the strengths? What do you think the weaknesses? What would you like to see in a new ordained leadership, rostered leadership? If you dreamed about Messiah, what would you dream about it? Those sort of things. And they do that for a number of months, and then they write a document and fill out a bunch of paperwork, and they turn all that in to the synod office. And then the synod office reviews that, and then hopefully gives us permission to start a call committee. So, So your best case scenario probably for a call committee would be like next spring or so. That would be the best case. But Christ Lutheran in Bexley is on their second year of being an interim. So, well, we do not want to disparage Christ Lutheran in Bexley. I only use it as an example that sometimes these things take longer for reasons that aren't unearthed until it happens. So I just want people to be aware. I just want people to be aware that, and the council knows that the best thing they can do is communicate and communicate and communicate. So they'll be letting you know how this process goes. But that is the general process. So a transition team and a call committee team, they're not necessarily the same things, but they could have some similar people. And you're going to want to have a mix of demographics of our congregation and these teams. You're going to want to have some older leaders and newer leaders on this team. And you're going to be thoughtful. Who do you want to have picking, the next leader of your congregation? And so I'm sure you guys will spend some good time finding people for that call committee, and that you will be grateful to them. Once you get a call committee, then the synod will send you one name, two names, three names, but no more than that. And it depends on how many names they have to send you. And so pastors put in mobility papers, and so we fill out pages and pages of things. If I was a tree, what kind of tree would I be? And those sort of things. Who was my favorite Bible hero and why? These kind of questions. We fill out all that paperwork, and then the bishop's office takes on the task of trying to match paperwork and people that want to move to churches that are open. And then they have the power to tell you who you can interview. You're allowed to ask them to interview other people. So right, so that's how I came here, was that people knew of me, and they asked if I could interview, and the synod office said no initially, and then your call committee pushed back harder, and then they said yes. So the congregation's not without some power, because they don't want you to be mad at them, but this is the string they hold, and they carry wisdom in doing this. So this isn't an evil thing. And so then they match, and then they send. I think personally that this is a strong enough church with a lot of great things going on, and it's in Columbus, Ohio, which is a very desirable place to live in Ohio, that I don't think you're going to lack for people that want to interview here. The church I'm going to sat 3 years before anyone wanted to go there. But I don't think that's going to be your situation. I think you're going to have people asking. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if people are calling the synod office regularly before we even have our call papers and begging the synod to say, hey, as soon as Messiah opens up, can you put me on the list, Bob? Here's a bottle of bourbon to think about it, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if that's what's happening. I can tell you this: the Clintonville Church, Gethsemane, and Lord of Life, both got pastors that were last in Texas, and so both these guys have some Columbus connections, and they wanted to get back to Columbus, and they're 35 years old, and so they knew of it from friends of friends, sort of thing. So yes, the pastors have ways of knowing, and why did they want to come here? Because Gethsemane and Lord of Life are great churches. Yes, they are both wonderful churches, but they're also in really cool places to live, and they're 35 years old, and they both wanted to live in these areas, and so that was desirable for them. So I think. I don't think you're going to lack for people to interview. And then, I'm going to finish. Kelly?
I was on council when we hired Pastor Carl.
Okay. I would have to think about Phyllis has told me she was on the call committee. I didn't remember that, so. Yeah, there you go. I'd have to really think about who was on there, Phyllis. Phyllis could probably help me, huh? Martha was the one who got me here. I'll have to think about that. Phyllis right here for sure. Okay, so let me finish up. I'm running over my time here. There you go. I cannot promise, that's my standard line, that I can promise you're going to get someone as talented as me, not as good looking as me. Okay, so here's what happens at call committee real quick, so I've already not honored my time. The call committee interviews the person, all three people, and then they release two of them, and they ask one of them to move forward with them. Sometimes they interview them twice, and then they release them, and they one of them, just depends. But at some point, they communicate to one of them that they want to move forward, and then that person communicates whether they want to move forward or not. That's kind of how the dance goes. And if they both want to move forward, then usually they have an interview that includes counsel, financial packages, those sort of questions are asked. And then and that's a final sort of thing that they have, so like a third sort of touch. And then if they want to move forward past that, then they might have a congregational meeting like I'm going to do next week, where you guys get to meet them. Maybe they'll come on a Sunday morning. If you remember, I came here on a Sunday morning and I preached with Art Heimrow here. Oh, I don't know if you remember that, but I did. So that might be a piece of what happens. And then a call committee would say, we recommend Carol to be our next pastor. To the council would accept that. They should accept that, but we assume they accept that. And then council would send a letter to the congregation saying, we are going to have a congregational meeting to vote on Carol to be the next pastor. She's going to be here for a meet and greet on Saturday afternoon, or she's going to be here to preach on a Sunday, depending on what their church schedules are. And you'll be able to meet them, and we're going to vote on, June 21st, 2027 on this person. And so that would be that's the way it happens. Only members can vote. One of the things that I've heard that interims are trained to do is to tighten up our membership roster. And I can tell you, I have never touched the membership roster, because it always feels like a third rail, that all I'm going to do is get stung and bit, and no one likes to get letters that says, hey, are you still a member here? If not, we're going to kick you out. But you probably need a tighter membership roster as you come to this point, for that vote, because you want people that are committed and interested in the church to be the people choosing your next pastor. So there you go. So that's how it would end, and then they would have a starting date, and they would begin. And the best case scenario for that would be a year from now. That would be the best case scenario. You need to get that in your heads, that's the best case scenario, I think, by the way that the ELCA does this transition.
Is there data how long Art was here before you came?
A year. A little less than a year, like 10 months. Yeah, you only had a year between me and Landis. Yeah, you only had a year between me and Landis when I came, like maybe 14, 15 months, but in that ballpark. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and that's because Landis left a healthy church and there wasn't more to do. Like I said, if the church has problems that they uncover, then they're gonna slow it way down. And then the last thing I have on here is give space to the new pastor. Allow them to make mistakes, to be different than your last pastor, to have different gifts and passions, to make changes for their comfort. Sometimes pastors just like to do things like that because it makes them feel more attached, and even though that's not the way you've done things, and to listen for that, and to kind of honor the needs of that pastor that you've called. You know, one of the things that came up in my interviews is that the last pastor changed the benediction that they always did, and you know, and it kind of freaked him out. And I'm thinking, well, I only do the one benediction always. That's what feels like the end of the service to me, and I don't intend to change that. And then that's what I'm thinking to myself, geez, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to, because I'm proud, because that's my comfort level to do that benediction. May the Lord bless you and keep you. And so pastors are going to have quirks like that's what's important to them, and you need to listen to that and give them space. You need to love them, right? Because that's what we're called to do, and get to know them, and know that it's going to be a good long year. You know, I know everybody's name that's in this room right now. That's not going to be the case, you know, for this new person, and you just need to give space for that. And it was not for me 23 years ago. That's right. Okay. Anything else? Anyone want the? Thank you for coming. Thank you for being at home too. I know there's some people that are listening now and will later too. And thank you to Adam for setting this up so we could do that on home, and staying way past his bedtime up there too. Okay. Okay. Thanks, guys. Let's close with the doxology. Who's my singer that's going to start me and do that?
I can't start it a cappella.
You can't start? Virginia, you do that all the time for me. Can you do that? Is God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him up